Jon Mendez here with part 2 of our how-to on prop wash. This time we're going to be doing how to use that prop wash to make berthing easier, 3 different ways to leave the berth on a smallish boat, single engine, shaft driven, and how we can berth it the wrong way too, so not using that prop wash, using that little bit of elements. Anything with a tiller and a handed prop is quite hard to steer in a stern, because the prop and the rudder are always having a little battle. So quite often the way to do it is to get the boat going in astern and then pop the engine in neutral and then see if you can steer. And you can see there that the rudder's not having any effect. The boat's not going quickly enough for the momentum of the prop induced to overcome it. So it's often best to create room by going astern and then do your manoeuvring by going ahead again to correct whatever you've been up to. So we're now going to attempt berthing to use the prop to our effect. So we're going to moor port side 2, and we're breaking all my golden rules of do everything going up the hill into the elements. I've got a little bit of tide behind me, got a wind behind me, so all of those things are trying to take me past the berth. The good news is that by controlling the speed, don't let it get too great, and thinking about how we're going to use that prop wash to kick the stern in, we're going to aim at the very top end of the berth so that we are almost aiming where we want the stern to land. And all the time we're just gently controlling that speed in and out of gear, and then as we get really quite close we start to steer the bow away so that we're now thinking about aiming at the point on the pontoon we want the bow to end up, and as we're coming up here to where the stern is, keeping the bow slightly tight to the pontoon because I know the stern's going to kick to port. Start to go astern, look over my shoulder, just enough astern to make me stop, and there goes my stern line. Nice and easy. So we've already shown you that our preferred technique is to moor port side 2. Now if you have got some elements, and we've got a lovely breeze here today, we can obviously moor it starboard side too. We just have to think about going as slowly as we can. There's a weeny bit of tide on the bow as well. And just using that wind and that little bit of tide as our brakes. Because every time we go astern, it's dragging the boat away from the pontoon, which is not ideal. So all I'm doing is choosing an angle. I don't know, I'm not good at those. 20, 30 degrees, something of that nature. And I'm just using in and out of gear to just gently walk the boat towards the pontoon, bearing in mind that every time I go astern it's not helping me, so if I can stop the boat just on the elements, starboard side 2, i.e. the wrong side, is possible. And remember, because of the way the astern gear kicks, we want to bring the stern in slightly tighter than we would, so that when we do the astern it just literally kicks it slightly away. So one of the other issues with our shaft drive boat is that it doesn't go in astern particularly well. You tend to have to put a bit of revs on to get the boat moving astern and then take it out of gear to actually get any steerage. And that's partly a relationship of how big the rudder is and whether the boat has a keel or not. This has a very, very shallow draft, so it doesn't have fantastic directional stability in astern. So it's much easier to leave bow first. Now, on a boat this sort of size, there's nothing wrong with what I hate seeing on big boats. A good shove off with the bow will get the bow nicely out and then you can just drive away. And that's very effective on small craft. You've always got to bear in mind that if you're pushing in any shape or form, boats can be heavier than expected, so do think about the weight and be very careful that you're only pushing off when the boat is stationary fore and aft. You don't want to ever be pushing a moving boat. So you can give it a good shove. There's another little technique. Generally we're always going to be leaving the stern line on until last, And another little technique that we can do is when we're moored with our stern line, we can just, if we've used a fender, just lift the fender and give a good pull on the stern line, and as the stern touches, that forces the bow out nicely as well. And that's a really good little technique if the boat's a little bit heavier and you don't want to actually push the boat itself. So all I did there was stern fender in, lifted the stern fender and just exerted some pressure on the stern line itself. By pulling the stern in, we're not going to hurt anything because the boat's not moving fore and aft. That forces the bow out and then I can drive off. I must go straight because otherwise the stern will dig in if I try and steer away. So it's straight initially, gain some space and then you can turn. So the last way we can get it off involves something called a spring. So that's a line going from the stern of the boat going forwards, and as we reverse against that line, we put tension on the line and that forces the stern in and the bow out. Now obviously the only problem we have is we have to release the line. So all we do is release from on board, pull it in, and as soon as it's in, we drive away in ahead with the helm straight until we can get clear and then turn to leave. So touch of a stern. That's now forcing the bow out, creating an angle here. Look over my shoulder, no one there. If you want a little bit more revs, it just makes the angle steeper. When you're happy with the angle, into neutral. Release your line, just pull it in. Make sure it's all in before you go into gear. And straight initially, and then helm over to drive away. So in conclusion, using that little bit of prop wash really helps with berthing the boat. Slows it down, brings the stern in, and if you've approached in the right direction, that means you can keep it nice and tight, get it stopped and get that stern line on. Those little ways to leave, really important. Put those in your toolbox. Have fun.